Hey, folks. Welcome to this week's edition of Thursdays with Mike. And today we're just going to be done with demons. Okay, we're just done. We're just going to expel the demons. I'm ready to be free of all of my demons. I really am. It's just part three of the sermon from a couple Sundays back, expelling our demons. The text was Mark chapter 1, 21 through 28, where Jesus encounters a man in the grip of an unclean spirit who cried out, and Jesus rather perfunctorily just said, zip it and out of him, and it came out. People were impressed because he didn't negotiate, he didn't use incantations, etc. We're going to talk about actually more about the nuts and bolts of that. But that was the story, and so we talked about how we live in a disenchanted age where we would see that as being more of a accommodation in a more superstitious time, because that was obviously just somebody who was mentally disturbed, and we'll get into that a little bit today as well. But we talked about living in a disenchanted age, Scooby-Dooification. You just need to go back to the sermon if you like. You'll find it in our archives on the Vineyard Boise site. And then we talked about the Near Eastern worldview of actually the intersection of heaven and earth, the heavenly places being this intersection where you have God and the darker powers occupying the same zone and both potentially showing up somewhat randomly and often capriciously and so forth. So much of the effort of pagan religion, and honestly Israelite religion, a lot of its expression as well, was trying to control and manipulate the spiritual realm. But a definite understanding that there's more going on than meets the eye. That we lived in a nuanced reality in which we looked at Ephesians 2, the world rulers of this age and so forth, the author of the spirit, the prince of the power of the air, who's the author of the spirit that now works in those who are disobedient and so forth. So again, we're in this intersection of a spiritual reality that is impacting the world that we see about us, and so that makes heaven something that's not far removed from us, but actually right here, just right here among us, so like another dimension in which we live. If we just key in a little bit more to perhaps science fiction, which that doesn't bother a lot of people. Also, of course, this is science fiction, but this would be like an alternate dimension, which we are happy to go to in a lot of our entertainment and even secular speculations. This is kind of tapping into that same dynamic. So we talked about this key principle of all three of these sermons, because there were like three sermons, is what I realized as I got up on that Sunday morning. And that is, we want to live with a balanced awareness of the spiritual realm, avoiding the extremes of an aspiritual rationalization and a paranoid obsession with paranormal demonic activity, where we just see it happening everywhere. Everything's a demon. Everyone's possessed with a demon. Especially your spouse and your kids. So we want to avoid that. We read through the statement of faith and so forth. And so we come now to what I call Demonology 201, which is getting towards a definition of what a demon is. And so now we're getting it. And the resource that I dug into, Kittle's Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, which is just digging into both Greek culture, Jewish culture, and then interacting with the biblical record and kind of putting that all together. And so just calling a little bit from that. Daimon is the Greek word. I'm not going to worry about the PowerPoints at this point. I'm just going to make Mitchell's job easier, and this way I don't have to be clapping and so forth. So we'll just keep this simple. But daimon is the Greek word, and then there's also a related word which is actually more common, daimonion. Which eon at the end of a Greek word tends to make it like diminutive, And so like teknon is child, teknion is little child. So I don't know if daimon is demon and daimonion would be little demon. But anyway, daimonion is actually the more common one. Daimon is just a handful of times in the New Testament. But daimonion we encounter 11 times in Matthew, 13 times in Mark, and 23 times in Luke. Which is interesting to see at least in the order of our Gospels, an intensification of occurrence. At least until you get to John, where there's just no demon possession mentioned at all. We'll talk about that in a bit here. But Kittle's Theological Dictionary of the New Testament summarizes that a daimon was regarded as we're talking about Greek culture here, which does blend over a bit into Mediterranean culture in general and kind of the Jewish conception. I mean, there is a bit of a bleed over into it. A daimon is an intermediary superhuman or supernatural or supranatural being for good or ill. So in other words, it was morally neutral. Would have included originally what we now consider angels, good, demons, bad, all under daimon. So we're dealing with intermediary, superhuman, or supernatural beings. Greek philosophy incorporated these intermediaries into its system and worldview by ascribing strong passions to them and locating the bad ones, at least, close to the earth. So good ones, ethereal up there, bad ones, the closer you get to earth, the more evil it is. All right, that is very much the Greek philosophical standpoint. I would say that's probably that is a point of contrast with Hebrew spirituality and with the ultimate reality revealed in Christ, which is earth is good. God saw all that He made it is good, and humanity good. Yes, we did get cracked, but the basic goodness is there and the beauty is there to be evoked. Incarnation is a validation and an actual clothing itself with material reality. So what you say is evil inherently in the Greek philosophical mindset. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us in earth and was even buried in earth and descended into Sheol, because under the earth is like even worse. The closer you get to earth, if that's evil, then to actually go down into the earth. So beneath the earth, or under the earth, it's like the hold of all that's dark and evil, and that's kind of where our conception is. Hell is like down below us. We know just understanding geology, that there's actually just a mantle at the center of the earth that is hot, burning ball of, so we understand the earth and its crust and so forth, but ancient cosmology didn't have that awareness. It was just hell down there. That is Sheol, the place of dark, the place of the dead. That's where we end up, kind of in limbo, and that is where all the dark, bad things are. So closer you get to earth, the more evil. Let's see, either under it or in the immediate atmosphere. That tends to be where the bad intermediaries hang out. The closer to earth they were, the more evil. Popular belief in ancient Near Eastern culture identified daimons fundamentally with the spirits of the departed. So this would be like ghosts, which led to trying to consult them so as to put them into service. And that is a big focus in ancient religion. Again, both pagan, and you see elements of that occurring within, we'll just see in the Old Testament as well. It's marshaling, trying to marshal these intermediary supernatural beings and to control and manipulate them to accomplish our purposes, which is actually a lot of what's happening in most of human religion, of whatever brand. We're trying to control the supernatural, bend it to our will, and accomplish our purposes. In some, we may say that in popular Greek belief, the daimon is a being often thought of as a spirit of the dead, endowed with supernatural powers, capricious and incalculable, we might say ineffable, present in unusual places at particular times and at work in the terrifying events in nature and human life, but placated, controlled, or at least held off by magical means. In Judaism, in the Judaism of Jesus' day, a daimonion was an evil, supernatural agency or being working in opposition to God and the harm of humans. All right, so there is a blending over. But to understand the Greek worldview, I think may help us to understand some of the origins of a lot of our conceptions, which is just helpful, I think, in just us being able to peel back the layers of baggage that potentially are coming from other places, so we can get a proper, a more healthy appraisal of what is exactly the nuanced reality that we're looking at. So that's daimon. Okay, and that's what they considered daimon. When Paul came to Athens and was talking about Jesus and Anastasia, resurrection, they assumed they said he seems to be a setter forth of strange daimonia, strange demons, is how it literally be translated. But they weren't thinking demons like evil creatures. They were just thinking intermediate spiritual powers that culture had firm belief in, that's what reality was about. It's about knowing who they are, knowing their names, and that's how to control, complete, and placate them, so that they're not doing us harm, and we can actually harness them to our good. All right, so that's daimon. And so we move on then. Okay, so what are exactly the biblical encounters with the demonic? And what we find is we move from mysterious isolated incidents in the Old Testament to what seems to be like normal cultural phenomena in the New Testament. So something's happened. There's like the gear has been shifted, and it's like it's like in hyperdrive when we step into the Gospels. Because what we have in the Old Testament, we have like the sons of God in Genesis 6, which would it would take a whole session of Thursdays with Mike to talk about that, which maybe I can sometime, I don't know, but I'm just ready to be done with demons. Okay, so that'll just have to be later. But the sons of God in Genesis 6, who saw the daughters of men, and they wanted them, and they took for themselves the ones they desired, and so forth. Sons of God is Hebrew speak for daimonion in Greek culture, intermediate supernatural beings, and in this case, it's like they are invading Earth to take females, and these are perhaps the same ones spoken of in Jude and 2 Peter, 2 Peter 2, about angels that did not keep their domain but left their proper habitation, and they're now reserved in everlasting chains, awaiting judgment. So we're not dealing with those things, whatever they were, because they are locked away, but clearly Jesus dealing with other things. So we have the sons of God in Genesis 6. We have Saul's evil spirit from the Lord, which is interesting. They didn't have the devil to blame. Everything good or evil comes from God. That's directly asserted in Isaiah 45. God does good, light and darkness, good and evil. They all come from God, who is the source of all things. Saul has an evil spirit from the Lord that comes on him. That spirit is evidently calmed by David's strumming of a kinnor and the singing of psalms, and yet it's never cast out. In fact, in the middle of what seems to be a soothing, worshipful encounter, Saul takes a spear and tries to pin the worship leader to the wall with it. So, all kinds of lessons there for us. But anyway, so we have Saul's evil spirit from the Lord that gets us definitely scratching our heads. And then we've also got the summoning of the spirit of Samuel, the witch at Endor. That would be total, that culture with the daimon, departed spirit that has knowledge and insight, perhaps power that we're trying to harness and use. Lots of scratching of our heads with that one too. The disenchanted, we'd see it as, it's totally just a seance and she's putting on a show. But anyway, that's a good Scooby-Dooified answer on that one. And then there's the lion spirit sent into the 400 prophets. And that was with Jehoshaphat and Ahab. They had like 400 prophets who were basically, it's religion stamping the political leaders' next military campaign and endorsing it as being God's will. And 400 of them did it, and there was just one, Micaiah, who refused to ultimately and said, I saw the Lord saying, who's going to go and cause all the prophets to say the wrong thing? And a lion spirit came forward and said, oh, I'll do it. And he said, okay, go on. Again, a lot of head scratching. We live in a nuanced reality, people, with a God who is, in a reality with a capital R, that we simply cannot fit within our systematic theologies. His ways are as high above ours as the heavens are above the earth. And we might say they are just as deep as the mantle of the earth as well. The height and the depth and the width and the breadth, it's just beyond us. But anyway, so a lot of strangeness there, but yet it's kind of, it's restricted to those four. We come into the New Testament, we got a demon in the synagogue in Mark 1. We've got many demons then that night that are cast out of people outside of Peter's home. Then you have in Mark 5, you have Legion, where you have this demon-possessed man who's naked and cutting himself with stones, and he runs to Jesus, and that whole interview takes place, and Jesus says, what is your name? Legion, because we are many. So it's like, you got 1,000 demons inside of you. They go into the pigs and so forth. That's another story, which we'll get to in our study of Mark on Sundays. Next year, probably sometime. And then we've got the demon and a blind and a mute man in the Gospels. Basically, we've got like 10 occurrences, interactions or mentions of demons, and a handful of stories directly narrated. We've got a demon and Syrophoenician's daughter that Jesus cast out from a distance. He just says, she's free. So he didn't have to be there, didn't have to do anything. He just said, okay, your daughter is fine. From a distance. Demon and a distressed father's son. That's after the Mount of Transfiguration. The disciples could not cast him out. Jesus did. That's another whole story in itself. We're not going to, I'm just summarizing, just hitting the highlights. 7 demons that were cast out of Mary Magdalene. We have the disciples being empowered to cast out demons. I mean, they're sent to go heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. So it's like in their job description when they're going out, which the implication of those texts is that's our job description too. So in essence, we're going to be encountering the same reality, would seem to be the implication from that. Then we go into the book of Acts, and we've got a couple of specific cases there. We have a demon in a fortune-telling slave girl, which is classic Greek scenario of an intermediate supernatural being that is being used for human agenda, in this case, an economic agenda. And then the demon who beat up the would-be exorcists, 7 Jewish priests that tried to use Jesus and Paul as magical incantation names to gain power over a demon, and it didn't work. They ended up getting beaten up, and that actually ended up being the catalyst for a wave, what we would call a revival. It was just a wave of impact, just rippled out and shook the whole culture to the core, which is what power encounters and power evangelism that John Wimber talks about. That's the whole point. So what we're left with as we come to the New Testament, essentially 2 alternatives. We can either look at this as, yes, this is a reflection of reality, and it's almost like a demonic pandemic coinciding with the incarnation of Jesus. In essence, like a counter invasion of the demonic meeting the inbreaking of the kingdom in Christ. Christ is the Word is becoming flesh, and so you have this outbreak of the demonic taking up residence in people. And of course, there are those who, in a disenchanted culture and Scooby-Dooification, would just say, it's just an accommodation, attributing to dark powers what we now understand as assorted psychoses and other psychological and physiological phenomena. I would say, yeah, we're dealing with both. Potentially, it's a nuanced existence, an intersection. Um, uh, Reality has more layers than meet the eye. Reality is like Shrek. It's like that onion, has layers. Doesn't mean that demonic is always present, which we need to be careful with. But let's talk specifically. This is like demonology. Well, I guess you could say we then go into to 301 potentially. 301 will save. Okay, let's just finish up 201 here. Demon possession or oppression. We don't have a systematic demonology set forth anywhere. So let's just be careful. We see phenomenon that we can, in Scripture that we can look at, and hopefully that can help us to help people, and to do what Jesus did. He went about doing good and healing hurting humanity. So that's what the intent of this is. But this is summation again from Kittel, this really big, thick, brainy book with a lot of Greek and Hebrew in it and so forth. Its summation: in most of the stories of possession, what is at issue is not merely sickness, but a destruction and a distortion of the divine likeness of humanity according to creation. The center of personality, the volitional and active ego, is impaired by alien powers which seek to ruin the man and sometimes drive him to self-destruction. And that would be specifically the man possessed by the legion of demons in Mark 5. The ego is so impaired that the spirits speak through him. Okay? And then he continues, Jesus is conscious that he now breaks the power of the devil and his angels, or his daimons, because he is the one in whom the dominion of God is present on behalf of humanity. All right, that's good kingdom theology, is what we would say. He is the one in whom the dominion of God is present on behalf of humanity. And so therefore, as Jesus put it, I'm binding the strong man and plundering his stuff, which is people who have been taken captive to do his will, people who are hurting under the influence of darkness. Thus, the healing of the demon-possessed is an essential part of the record of the synoptics, that is Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and Acts. Significantly, John does not have any cases of demon possession. John just bypasses all of that. Jesus is accused of having a demon, but we don't have any cases of demon expulsion in John. John just trumps the whole thing by going directly for satanic possession. Satan, the devil, Hasatan, put into the heart of Judas to betray Jesus. And when Jesus gave him that morsel at the Passover meal, it says that Hasatan entered him. So it's like John is saying, yeah, okay, you guys have demons. I've got the devil himself. All right, actually possessing or oppressing or taking hold and entering into the inner circle of Jesus. And interestingly enough, there's no exorcism. Jesus lets it play its course because it all had a purpose, ultimately, an eternal purpose that was revealed in it. The crucial thing, Kittel continues, is demons are expelled by a word of command issued in the power of God and not by the invocation of a superior, but essentially similar spirit, or by the use of material media. In essence, no magic, no incantations. Jesus didn't say, I rebuke you. He just rebuked them. There was no, he just didn't do the exorcism thing. And that's what struck the people, is that Jesus didn't say, by this or by this, he just said, quiet and out. It was pretty simple, which begins to get us over into, I guess, what we could call demonology 301. And so this would just be in summation. What we have in these cases of the demonic that we see in the Gospels is Jesus was direct. Okay, this is kind of like, what did Jesus do? WDJD. Jesus was direct. Jesus used few words. All right, so Jesus didn't say, I rebuke you, Satan. Jesus just rebuked the demon. I mean, he just said, quiet and out. Um, and so he was direct. He used few words. He didn't use a formula. And so we see a great variety from a distance, sometimes in person. One time he has an interview. Interesting, he interviews a demon. I don't think he asked the name of the demon because he needed that to be able to deal with it. I don't know, you could get that from it, I suppose, but that starts getting into the magical incantation, pagan stuff. He just, Jesus even takes time to listen to a demon. Wow. I mean, wow. But he didn't use a formula, so that just shows us not all demons are the same. When you do encounter one, now they're not all the same, so don't put it in a box. Don't try to put it in a box, otherwise you might be getting beaten up and you'll run out bleeding and naked or something. And every human situation is unique. Jesus didn't freak out would be the fourth point of observation. Jesus was direct. He used few words. He didn't use a formula, and he didn't freak out. The demons did, actually. And that goes back to the first word in that in the synagogue. The demon says "ah" in Greek, "ah," which is "ee." If you were just here and suddenly realized that there was a giant spider crawling on your shoulder, okay, that's this. That's exactly what the demon did. That's what demons do. Is whoa, whoa. It's actually the Holy One of God. Whoa, I know who you are. It's like recognition. And even the demons believe and tremble, James says. So don't freak out if they're demons. They're freaking out if Christ is in you. You should freak out if you're trying to use Jesus like some kind of incantation, because they're probably going to just beat the tar out of you. But Jesus didn't freak out. Because the demons, they freaked out enough as it was. Sorry, I'm going along, but I need to be done with the demons here. So just two concluding footnotes. Number one, expelling demons is perhaps like shooing flies. It clears the wounds so the real healing may now begin. All right, when the demonic is there, and I would say beware of diagnosing people with demons when all you're doing is like giving them more demons through that. They're already tortured enough by psychological conditions or physiological conditions, and it's like you're putting another thing on them. So just be careful of just seeing a demon in every condition. When demons are there, I would suggest that the biblical conception is you've got to see that not as the root of the problem, but rather, flies to wounds. You shoo them away, and now the healing can begin. So it's like casting out the demon doesn't necessarily finish the work. A lot of times it just means now the real work can begin. And on a psychological level, that's kind of like getting on your meds so you can calm down when it is just a psychological or physiological imbalance. And now the real work can begin. Because the daimon in Greek and biblical cultures typically attributed to these violent upheavals within us, and they just explained it as demons. And it may be that, it may be physiological imbalances that are attracting demonic. It just has layers, and it can get pretty weird pretty quickly. Keep our wits about us. Just understand it's more like shooing flies. I would suggest anyway. And so don't see it as a cure-all, and don't make it your go-to diagnosis when you're dealing with hurting humans. Take the time to listen. Jesus listened to a demon, listen to people. And then the last note, and then we're done. Expelling demons. Expelling demons can be a loud, convulsing, and messy process, and has been known to start riots. Acts 16, Acts 19, and then, of course, there was the stampeding herd of pigs. So, it can be a loud, convulsing, and messy process, which just reminds us that when we're dealing with the core issues in our life, it's often not going to be pretty, and we just have to be able to wade into that. So, all right, there you have it. I would say the concluding challenge from this whole three sermon, three tiered exploration is it just comes down to each of us, which is an appropriate question, I believe, at this juncture in our culture, in our history right now. What demon needs to be named and expelled that has been impacting your life and or our life together and inhibiting our growth as human beings? And so I put that in quotes because it may be demonic or it may be the inner upheavals within you, the imbalances, personally, culturally, politically, religiously, what needs to be identified and expelled within us. So there you have it. Sorry for the length. Yeah, that's about 30 minutes. Yeah, again, at least three sermons in that one day. And I probably could have split this out. Probably should have, but now it's done. And now we can move on to other things, I hope, next week. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed the ride. Feel free to connect with me if you have any questions. I don't know how much more I can say about it than I've said here, honestly. And you are delightfully free to disagree and also to dig in. And anyway, there you go. Enjoy. Well, I'll see you next time on Thursdays with Mike.